Looks like I'm just going to talk about meditation, self-reflection, and perhaps emptiness, and share with you a few of the extremes and kind of diversions that I've seen and witnessed in my own experience in my own life, as well as just as an observer, as someone studying these kinds of things and being immersed in various cultures, various ecosystems of people doing these practices. So first, the first thing I want to say about meditation is that I think a lot of times we as modern people approach the practice in a very Protestant, a very Christian, a very entitled, a very arrogant, in very stupid kind of way. Meaning we carry all of our baggage from being raised in this modern world and just carry it and put it onto this thing which we think is exotic or esoteric or special or somehow above our normal everyday life. And that just kind of makes the whole process self-defeating in the truest sense, because we're taking this thing and trying to make it this thing and trying to make them go together, but perhaps our original conditioning and programming is actually the barrier that's keeping us from actually experiencing that, because perhaps meditation isn't something that we can forcibly do or sort of neurotically judge ourselves for not being able to do, but maybe it's something that just happens as a natural result under the right conditions. And maybe the conditioning that we have is the conditions under which that can't naturally exist by default, by definition, and potentially by design. Because if you reach this state or feel this within yourself, you all of a sudden probably become a bit less reliant upon external imagery. And when you have this experience or have these experiences, you realize kind of the decorative, kind of superstitious, kind of extraneous quality that many or most, if not nearly all, religious and spiritual traditions or cultures have. And you see that it becomes more of kind of just a cultural decoration or a cultural organization that is probably just a barrier to the actual experience, even though originally it probably came out of someone's felt experience. So within there, to take all of that and make it more simple, the presupposition is that somehow the enlightened person is different than me, or somehow their awareness is different than mine, or their spirit is different than mine, or separate than mine, or somehow above mine, and then somehow I'm going to get there. But if that's our presupposition, that basically is just monotheistic religion. That is Christianity. That's what I mean by the Protestant whole thing. It's like, well, here's the hierarchy, and if I just work hard enough, maybe I'll finally get the reward. Which is great if we want to be a Protestant or we want to be a Christian, then just do that. But if we want to be, meditation, we want to do spirituality and self-reflection and growth, let's do that. Let's not try to do both because it doesn't really work. It's like I'm going to be a health nut, raw food, person, but I'm going to do like meth on the weekends, and somehow they work together. I don't think that really works. So what happens with following this unconscious conditioning into a meditation practice is we get kind of the dial tone, the dial tone kind of effect. And this is something that you see a lot, and I just encourage you to look for it next time you're in sort of some environment with a group of people that practice these things. And people get this whole dial tone kind of like voice and like mentality about them. And everything's just beautiful and wonderful and amazing. And I'm just so calm, and I'm so centered. And everything is just, man. People get really in the sound of like, ah, and they think it's like, it's fucking transcendental, but it's just, it's just fucking dial tone. And it's a funny way of saying that basically we try to take our behavior, try to take all of our actions and our thoughts and just put them in this one little box that's acceptable, And that's how we're spiritual. And people, it's like, I'm really unique, I'm really expressive, or I'm really in tune with myself by conforming to this pre-existing standard that we all agree as a group is actually what this means, when in reality it doesn't. And that is verifiably true, because if you go in and try to behave or act differently than that standard, you meet resistance. You meet, ooh, what's wrong with you? Or you meet people saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't really get it. And just as a personal note, if I've made videos that are critical of spiritual things, or critical of psychedelics or otherworldly experiences. Critical meaning, yeah, this is true, this is great, this is valid, here are some, kind of like this video in a sense of like, yeah, here's some ways in which it's like people kind of go wrong. And then the reaction, I get emails, I get messages, I get comments, oh, I don't know what practice you're doing, but it's obviously not working, you're a fucking asshole. How dare you say these things, you're so mean. And it's this whole milieu and like just legion of just, whatever. And that's just one example. Also being in environments in person, I say things and it's like I just farted or something. People are like, is that him? Is that you? Is he done? Did that happen? And back to the deal. So it just kind of happens. And it becomes ironic and self-defeating because we're doing this thing that's about expression and freedom, but we're doing it in this, again, Christian Protestant, very limited, very standardized kind of way, which is just the dial tone, where I feel like our whole emotional state, our whole humanity just has to be like, and it's pretty funny. You see this a lot, you hear it a lot. You hear it in people's voice, you hear it in the tonality, in the lack of dynamism, in the lack of ability to explore different emotions without it being, right now I'm just so into this and I'm so into that and it's my thing. Meanwhile, just carrying on the baggage and the judgment of that it's actually bad and something we have to enjoy, rather than just, it's just an experience, big deal, like, keep moving. Anyway, so getting to the other topic, which is self-reflection and really what that is. Because what happens is I think people idealize monastic culture, idealize ancient cultures, or what they think ancient cultures were, what they think ancient things mean, or what they think spiritual things mean within the context of this very reductionist scientism Christianity worldview, and then really take things to an extreme degree, like the dial tone thing that I was talking about, and then even self-reflection. Because what happens is, because people think everything has to be one and this like soup of minutia, and it's really interesting because externally, like, we're against pasteurization, homogenization, factory farming, and monoculturing, monocropping. We're against all that, but we want our mental life and our spiritual life to sort of like be monocropped and monocultured and genetically modified and standardized and pasteurized and homogenized. It's really interesting. So these things go to very extreme degrees where self-reflection becomes like self-psychotherapy, and where like subtly violently like categorizing ourselves all the time. Oh, I have this projection, I have that projection, I have this complex, that complex, this issue, that issue, this is and we become this neurotic, self-absorbed, elevated asshole, pretty much. But very subtly. I don't mean, sometimes it's outwardly and aggressive, but oftentimes it's very subtle, because we're taking it to such an extreme degree. And when really self-reflection, really what's required is just, well, what is self-reflection? Is it, instead of paying a therapist to listen to you drone on and on and on about minutia, oh, my mom said this, and my dad said that, and I think it means this, and I think it means that, and I'm going to try this, but I'm thinking about trying that, but then I tried this, but then I tried that, but then this happened, but I can't do it, and I might do it, and I will do it, maybe later, but I can't because I'm not good enough, and the whole story just unfolds. And you see this if you've ever gone to a practitioner and you're just want to unload, 2 hours of monologue, or you are a practitioner, people come and unload their whole rehearsed structured, narrative for their whole life and expect you to fix it. But in reality, you could just say, well, all the stuff out here, it's not really like this tea. It kind of like doesn't have any real meaning aside from kind of what I give to it. Meaning a year ago, I probably would have thought this tea tasted horrible. Happens to be a pu'er blend that's decently old. Last year I didn't really like pu'er. I thought oolong tea was all I could drink. Now, tastes amazing. The tea didn't change. Nothing out here changed. Nothing in the external world changed, but my view shifted. So it's really self-reflection just comes down to that. Like, oh, this relationship that I think is important, this thing that I think I need, in and of itself, not really that important, not really that valuable. It's just I'm creating that story or creating that narrative or creating that value for it. And this isn't like some Byron Katie bullshit where you have to deconstruct your story, and which is really ironic because if you say basically like, oh, that's just your story or just that's just your projection, then to say that is also true and is also negating the whole premise in the first place. Meaning if I say, oh, that's just your projection, that's just your story, well, it's also true that it's just my story and it's just a projection, that it's a projection, it's just that it's a story. So it's inherently self-defeating, so it's not really an effective strategy unless we understand, oh, yeah, it's just, self-reflection. A little bit is fine. But as what I'm trying to say is people go to such extreme degrees where they become dial tone, they become repressed, they become extremely neurotic. Or another example is people get really carried away on like bliss or thinking we have to be so happy all the time and just so elevated. When in reality, a little bit of happiness is okay. That's all we really need. Because when we set the bar so high, when we really push ourselves to extremes, we're just reinforcing the same problem that we're trying to get away from. And the higher the high, the lower the low. If there's anything that we can learn from drug addiction and drug addiction culture and capitalism and so many things in life, it's that extremes really create each other. But if we can learn to just actually have the fruits of meditation and the fruits of self-reflection, just be a little bit more, self-aware, a little bit more grounded, then there you go. Because what people don't realize is that the view, meaning what something is in the cultural context and the philosophy of it, is just as important as the method and is just as important as the fruit of that. They're all the same and they all go together. But what happens is in modern times we want to mix and match and have the newest, latest, greatest version. So we want to take meditation and mindfulness and combine it with a little bit of psychotherapy, a little bit of psychiatry, a little bit of modern medicine, a little bit of new age superstition, a little bit of crystal chakra healing, a little bit of interdimensional blah, 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 blah. And then what we get is, who the fuck knows? Something totally different than what any of the other things are really trying to do. It's just like I brewed this pu'er tea, and if I went in my cabinet and was like, oh, Drankenwell fresh green tea, that'll be really good. Throw it in there and then be like, matcha, fresh Japanese green tea, that'll be good too. Start throwing all these things in together, and then I brew it at 200 degrees. The result's probably going to be disgusting because there's so many different things, some different cultures and areas and nuances that I just didn't even consider and just try to put it all together in some mix mash. So really part of the point is realizing that these things aren't really that big of a deal unless we, again, make them into such a big deal. But by making them into a big deal, we actually keep ourselves from experiencing the fruits of the actual practice. Because it's just like the more you idealize something, the more you blow something up, the more useless that it becomes, and the harder it's going to fall. And it's just more barriers that you're creating between yourself and the thing that you supposedly want or the thing you're supposedly working for, which is fine, which is your right, which is something we all can do if we want to, but it doesn't mean we have to. So it's also realizing, like I was saying, a little bit of happiness is okay. And a little bit of sadness is okay, a little bit of anger, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of the spectrum of human emotions, fine. It's really not a big deal. It's kind of part of our experience as humans. But when we really get so far extreme and so far away from our actual basis of reality, we don't even question our basic assumptions, then we're really asking for trouble. We're asking for problems, and our view, our method, and our fruit are not really one and the same. They're, again, this huge conglomerate, amalgam, mixture, stew thing, which modern people really love fusions, you know? It's like, I want to take my shallow, limited understanding of 5 things and put them together into a shallow, limited understanding of however many things. And then I feel really good because my mind has been conditioned and addicted to such complexity and anxiety and excessively mental level of functioning that's the only way I can interface and relate to any of these things is within that way. Which again, negates the whole part of the practice and makes it something different, which is totally cool. But probably need to call something different words, different terminology. So the last thing we were going to talk about following self-reflection is the concept of emptiness. And a lot of people want to, this is another one of those kind of like conversation killers that is kind of irrelevant, kind of like, oh bro, it's just your opinion, it's just your projection, it's just your reality, it's just this, it's just that, blah, 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 blah. It's a way also saying, oh, well, everything's empty and everything's everything and nothing at the same time, so what does it matter, blah, blah, blah. These are kind of just ways of demonstrating that we don't really understand the actual principle. We don't understand the context where the principle comes from. We don't really understand how it relates to a whole lot of other things within that ecosystem. We're doing it basically in a way to put up a barrier or a blockade and not allow a conversation or a dialogue to progress past a certain point. It's kind of a way of disarming or disengaging or maintaining distance, which again is fine, but we just have to see it usually for what it is. And it's as effective as saying, well, clouds exist, water exists, sunlight exists, there's trees, there's plants, there's birds. It's like, yeah, you want to say anything else that's self-evident, which has nothing to do with anything relative to what we're talking about? Right, okay. So anyways, leading us back to the whole idea of emptiness. What does that mean? It's not a good word that modern people like to hear or understand. Makes us feel afraid or makes us feel depressed or despondent. But it's interconnected with these other 3 concepts of meditation and self-reflection, because if we understand self-reflection is the reflection and realization of our giving meaning to things externally, then we realize, oh, well, the thing in and of itself is kind of empty. Empty in the sense that, you know, it can contain so many different meanings, so many different uses, so many different purposes, probably infinitely, because of its emptiness. You know, space can hold things because it's empty. The cup can hold things because it's empty. It's one way to look at it. The other way of looking at it is understanding the concepts of impermanence and interdependence, meaning that things that we appear or assume to be solid are actually at one point were something else and at a later point will be something else, and they're just in that transitional phase like we all are. The other thing is interdependence, meaning everything in reality goes together. Nothing is separate, nothing is higher or lower than anything else, and reality in and of itself is one thing. Our experience isn't an emotional experience, a physical experience, a spiritual experience, a logical experience, all these divisions of experiences. It's just one experience. Maybe you can tell yourself that, oh, well, this one's different, and this one's different, and this one, but we have to realize that's just a mental exercise. In reality, it's just the one experience. And we can understand these things that can all come full circle, because what is meditation? Well, it's a chance to just sit down and shut the fuck up for once. And it's really hard to do because we are so addicted to doing the illusion that we're doing and making all these things happen. So it's an opportunity to just stop for a period of time, just fucking stop. And then there's a degree of self-reflection that happens because we're just probably thinking, oh, I have to be quiet, I have to be still, I have to be all these things, but I'm not, and it's hard, and this sucks, and I gotta go to the grocery, and I hate my husband, and I hate my blah, 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 and oh wait, I'm not meditating, and it becomes this whole neurotic thing. When in reality, like I was saying earlier, view, method, and fruit all kind of go together. If we have the right view, the right understanding, the right philosophy, and the right foundation, then the method becomes easier, then the fruit becomes implied as well. But oftentimes people don't know this, people don't really want to recognize it because we don't even know what our view is. We think that we're raised in this world and we don't have any assumptions, we don't have any biases, we don't have any prejudices. That's the biggest, like that in and of itself is a bias, is a prejudice, is ignorance in the highest form. And we want to look at other cultures or other people or other situations and say, they should do this or they should do that, or I'm better, or I'm more advanced, or I'm smart. We look back at, other cultures and think, simple, stupid. Like clearly we're advanced now. Clearly we have cameras and the internet and YouTube. We're really advanced. But what if we weren't? What if that was just some bullshit we told ourselves so we can feel good about ourselves and feel good about the destruction and a lot of the other things that we do in life? Maybe that's all it is, but who would dare to consider that? Because we don't have any biases, we don't have any prejudices, especially when we add on the external or the extraneous layer of self-deception, meaning, well, now I'm compassionate, now I'm practicing mindfulness, now I'm being spiritual. It's like, at what point did that change, When did we go from the sort of like modern Christian scientism, monotheistic religion, hierarchical, mechanical, salvational worldview person to the spiritual person? At what point did that go? That's something that rarely is ever even brought up to the table. Because if we're trying to study something ancient, we're trying to study something outside of our worldview, it helps to even understand what our worldview is in the first place. It helps to be aware of our own biases, hence self-reflection. It helps to be aware of our own prejudices, hence self-reflection. It helps to actually take time to set aside to actually do that, hence meditation. And those two practices, or the same practice, I guess, has power, has legs, because we actually take time to look at the view, see what the view is, and then we actually have something, we actually can have an experience, instead of just trying to force our mind into this dial tone kind of state where it's just but then because our body experiences a degree of parasympathetic relaxation, we think, oh, that's spirituality, wow, yeah, that was a deep meditative experience. In reality, we're just falling over and going to sleep, which is not anything wrong with it. But again, maybe that's not really what the point was to begin with. I don't know. I don't have any answers. I'm just a guy who drank a lot of tea and bought a camera and also uploaded probably over 600, 700, 800 videos on YouTube over the last 6 years. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about you. How's your day? Whatever. Anyways, this video's done, and hopefully it's been helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.